The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast bowl carved from starlight itself, its walls shimmering with the soft glow of 1,000 different worlds. Dr. Una Park stood at the speaking platform, her small human form, dwarfed by the massive alien delegates that surrounded her in their floating seats and breathing chambers. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting her words into clicks, whistles, electromagnetic pulses, and chemical releases that the various species could understand. 3 years had passed since humanity had been granted membership in the Council, and Una still felt like a child among giants whenever she entered this place. The reptilian saurians lounged in their heated stone chairs, their yellow eyes reflecting ancient wisdom and barely concealed contempt for younger species. The insectoid representatives of the hive clicked and chittered among themselves, their compound eyes never quite focusing on any single point. Most mysterious of all were the ethereals, beings of pure energy that flickered and danced in their containment fields like living lightning. Today was different, though, because today Una had come to propose something that no species had ever asked for before. She cleared her throat and activated her speaking device, her voice carrying across the vast chamber with perfect clarity. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," she began, her hand steady despite the enormity of what she was about to request. "I come before you today not as a representative of humanity's military might or economic power, but as someone who speaks for our most precious treasure, our children." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the Saurian delegation. Their leader, a massive creature called Vextar, whose scales gleamed like polished copper, shifted in his seat with the sound of grinding stone. His translator rendered his thoughts in perfect human standard. "The mammals wish to discuss their spawn. How delightfully predictable." Una had expected this reaction, but she pressed on anyway. "What I propose today is simple in concept, but vital in application. I ask this council to establish as our first law a protection for human children, that no member species of this council shall bring harm to any human being under the age of 18 standard years." The chamber erupted in a symphony of alien sounds that the translators struggled to keep up with. The hive representatives buzzed with what sounded like confusion, their collective consciousness apparently unable to process why individual young would require special protection. From the aquatic section came the deep whale songs of the Depths Empire, their massive forms floating in their water-filled viewing chambers. "This is most unusual," clicked the primary hive speaker, its mandibles clacking together in rapid succession. "In our experience, the young are expendable until they prove their worth to the collective. Why should these human larvae receive special consideration?" Una had prepared for this question, too. She touched the small device at her throat that would project images into the chamber's central display area. Suddenly, the space above them filled with scenes from human worlds, children playing in parks, learning in schools, laughing with their families. "Because," she said quietly, "our children are not just our future, they are our purpose. Every human adult exists to protect and nurture the next generation. We build our cities around schools. We plan our economies around their needs. We even structure our military forces with their safety as the primary concern." The ethereal representative, Norak, flickered more brightly for a moment. Its voice came as a whisper of static through the translators. "Interesting. Most species prioritize the survival of adults who can reproduce. This focus on the immature is unusual." Admiral Thalion of the Depths Empire surfaced in his tank, his massive form sending ripples across the water. His voice boomed through the chamber like thunder rolling across an ocean. "The humans speak of protection, but what teeth do they have? Their fleets number in the hundreds, not thousands. Their worlds are few and far between. What consequence could there be for ignoring such a law?" This question made several delegates lean forward with interest. The Saurians especially seemed amused by the implication that humanity might somehow enforce their will on the galaxy's elder species. Vextar's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "Indeed," he rumbled. "What the soft-skinned mammals fail to understand is that law without enforcement is merely suggestion. We have ruled star systems since before their world developed complex life. What makes them think they can impose restrictions on us?" Una felt something cold settle in her stomach at those words, but she maintained her composure. "I'm not asking for this law because we can force you to follow it. I'm asking because it's the right thing to do. because protecting the innocent is what separates civilization from barbarism. The chamber fell silent for a moment, and in that silence, something strange happened. The ancient ethereal Norak pulsed with a deep red glow that his kind reserved for memories of great age. His static voice carried a weight that made even the arrogant Saurians pay attention. "There are records," Norak whispered. "Old files in the deepest archives, species classification data from the galaxy's early days, but surely, no, that was long ago." "What records?" demanded Vextar, his yellow eyes narrowing, but Norak's form flickered and went dim, as if the ancient being had decided he had said too much already. The voting proceeded despite the mysterious interruption. One by one, the species cast their votes, and to Yuna's surprise, the law passed unanimously. But as she listened to the comments that accompanied each vote, she realized that none of them were voting out of respect for the law itself. The Hive voted yes, because they found human, emotional attachment to their young to be an amusing quirk that cost them nothing to indulge. The Depths Empire agreed because they considered humanity too small to matter either way. The Saurians supported it because they thought it would give them something to hold over human heads in future negotiations. Even the smaller species seemed to view the law as a kind of joke, a way to humor the newest members of the galactic community. Only the ethereals remained silent about their reasons, their energy forms flickering with patterns that none of the other species could read. As the session ended and the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Yuna gathered her materials, with mixed feelings. She had gotten what she came for, but the casual dismissal of human concerns left a bitter taste in her mouth. These ancient species looked at humanity and saw weakness, saw a young race that didn't understand how the galaxy really worked. Vextar slithered past her on his way out, his massive form casting her in shadow. "Enjoy your little law, mammal," he hissed, his voice low enough that the translators barely caught it. "But remember that paper and good intentions mean nothing when real power is at stake." The Saurian leader moved on, leaving Yuna alone at the speaking platform. She stood there for a long moment, looking up at the empty chamber and thinking about his words. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps the law was meaningless without the power to enforce it. But something deep in her human instincts told her that Vextar was making a mistake, that there were aspects of human nature that even their own scientists didn't fully understand. As she finally turned to leave, she passed by the ethereal viewing area where Norak still flickered in his containment field. The ancient being pulsed once, with a color she had never seen before, a deep warning red that seemed to carry the weight of eons. "Be careful, young human," his static voice whispered. "Some laws exist not to protect the weak from the strong, but to protect everyone from what the weak become when they are truly threatened." Yuna paused, wanting to ask what he meant, but Norak had already faded from view, leaving her with questions that she couldn't quite form into words. She walked out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond, unaware that she had just set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. Captain Minho Kim sat in the command chair of the exploration vessel Harmony, watching the stars streak past through the main view screen. The ship hummed with the quiet efficiency that marked all human vessels, its crew of 50 working with the kind of coordination that came from months of deep space exploration together. They had been mapping the outer regions of the Kepler sector for the past 6 months, cataloging new worlds and checking on the scattered research outposts that humanity had established in this remote corner of the galaxy. The distress signal came in during the night shift, cutting through the routine chatter of the bridge like a knife. Communications Officer Jisuhan looked up from her console with wide eyes, her fingers dancing over the controls as she tried to clean up the transmission. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with concern. "We are receiving an emergency beacon from Research Station Echo on Kepler 4422b. The signal is badly damaged, but I'm reading multiple distress codes." Minho was out of his chair and at her side in seconds, his military training taking over despite years of peaceful exploration. "Can you get me details? How many people are we talking about?" Jisoo worked frantically at her station, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her screens. "According to the last census report, Station Echo has 43 researchers and support staff, plus—" She paused, her face going pale. plus 17 family members, including 8 children. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Every human crew member understood what those numbers meant, what the presence of children at the station implied. Research families were common on the frontier, but they were also humanity's most precious and vulnerable citizens. "Time to Kepler 442b at maximum speed?" Minho asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 18 hours, sir," replied Navigator Kyung Park from the helm. "I can push the engines harder, but we risk burnout." "Do it," Minho ordered without hesitation. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have a Code 7 situation in the Kepler sector." As the Harmony changed course and accelerated toward the distant planet, none of the crew spoke about what a Code 7 meant. It was a classification that hadn't been used in over 50 years, not since the early days of human expansion when pirates and raiders were still a serious threat. But every human in the fleet knew the protocols, knew what happened when their children were in danger. The 18-hour journey felt like 18 days. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442b, what they found confirmed their worst fears. The research station sat on the planet's surface like a cluster of white domes against the red desert landscape, but the signs of attack were obvious even from orbit. Scorch marks blackened the ground around the main buildings, and several of the outer structures had been completely destroyed. More ominous still were the 3 Saurian warships hanging in orbit around the planet like vultures waiting for carrion. Their sleek predatory designs marked them as ships of the Saurian Confederation, and their weapons were powered and ready. "Incoming transmission," Jisoo reported. "It's from the lead Saurian vessel." The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of a Saurian commander, his scales a deep bronze color that marked him as high-ranking military. His yellow eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement as he looked at the human bridge crew. "I am Commander Drac of the Saurian vessel Fang," he announced, his voice translated into perfect human standard. "You will withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences." Minho stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back, in a parade rest position that would have been familiar to any military officer. "I am Captain Minho Kim of the human vessel Harmony. We are responding to a distress call from our research station. What is your business here?" Drac's laugh was like glass breaking. "Our business is with the illegal weapons research being conducted on that planet. The humans have been developing terraforming technology that violates several council treaties. We are here to confiscate their research and arrest the criminals responsible." "That's a lie," Minho said flatly. "Our research stations are inspected regularly by council observers. Everything they do is completely legal." The Saurian commander's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you would like to discuss this with your fellow humans? We have several of them aboard our ships as our guests." The screen changed to show the interior of a Saurian holding cell, and Minho felt something cold and terrible settle in his chest. Dozens of human researchers sat huddled together in the cramped space, their clothes torn and their faces marked with fear. But what made Minho's blood freeze was the sight of the children among them. A young girl with pigtails, maybe 12 years old, sat pressed against the wall with tears streaming down her face. Next to her, a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 clutched a broken toy spaceship. Other children were scattered throughout the group, all of them terrified and confused. "As you can see," Drac continued, his voice taking on a mocking tone, "your people are quite safe, for now. But their continued well-being depends on your cooperation. You will transmit all research data from the station to our ships, and then you will leave this system and never return." Minho stared at the screen, his mind working through the implications of what he was seeing. The Saurians had just violated the first law of the galaxy, the protection that Dr. Yuna Park had fought so hard to establish 3 years ago. They had attacked a human research station and taken children hostage. "You have violated Galactic Council law," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Release those people immediately." Drac's laugh filled the bridge. "What law? That ridiculous mammalian sentiment about protecting spawn? We are not bound by the emotional weakness of lesser species. Your children mean nothing to us except as leverage." As if to emphasize his point, one of the guards in the holding cell struck the 12-year-old girl when she started crying louder. The sound echoed through the Harmony's bridge, and Minho watched as every human crew member went completely still. It was like watching a switch flip in the collective human consciousness. The bridge crew, who moments before had been focused on diplomacy and rescue, suddenly moved with a different kind of purpose. Their faces showed no anger, no rage, just a cold determination that was somehow far more frightening than any emotional outburst. Communications Officer Jisoo Han was already working at her station, her fingers flying over controls with practiced efficiency. "Captain," she said, her voice perfectly level, "I'm detecting encrypted burst transmissions from our beacon. The message is propagating through the hyperspace relay network." Minho nodded once, a sharp movement that somehow conveyed both understanding and approval. "Very good. Continue standard diplomatic protocols with the Saurians while we assess the situation." What Drac couldn't know, what none of the alien species truly understood, was that the distress beacon from Research Station Echo had done more than just call for help. Hidden within its emergency transmission was a secondary signal, one that was now spreading across human space faster than light itself. The signal was simple, consisting of just two pieces of information, the location of Kepler 442b and a single code that hadn't been transmitted in over a century. Code Shepard, the ancient emergency protocol that every human child learned in school, but that most adults hoped would never be used. Someone had attacked human children, and now the galaxy was about to learn why the first law existed. On the screen, Drac was still talking, still making demands and threats. But Minho was no longer really listening to him. Instead, he was thinking about his own son, Do-hyun, safe aboard a colony ship in the inner systems, and about all the other human children scattered across the galaxy. Children who played and learned and dreamed without knowing that there were monsters in the dark who would hurt them for nothing more than political advantage. The Saurian commander seemed to mistake his silence for fear or confusion. "You have 6 hours to comply with our demands," Drac announced. "After that, we will begin executing hostages, starting with the youngest." That was when Captain Minho Kim smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Commander Drac," he said quietly, "I think you should know that you and your ships are now in violation of the first law of the galaxy. The Galactic Council will be very interested to hear about this." Drac's laugh was dismissive. "The Council is far away, human, and your species lacks the strength to enforce your precious laws. We have 3 warships, and you have 1 exploration vessel. The mathematics are quite simple." "Yes," Minho agreed, his smile growing wider. "They are simple, but I don't think you understand them quite as well as you think you do." Dr. Unipark was reviewing xenobiology reports in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery when the signal arrived. She was deep in the galactic core region, studying the strange energy patterns that surrounded the ancient ethereal homeworlds. Her mind focused on the complex data streaming across her screens. The first sign that something had changed was when her assistant, Dr. Hyunwoo Kang, suddenly stopped what he was doing and stood perfectly still. Yuna looked up from her work to find Hyunwoo staring at his communication device with an expression she had never seen before. His face had gone completely blank, as if someone had just told him something so important that his mind had to shut down everything else to process it. "Hyunwoo?" she asked. "What's wrong?" He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach clench with sudden fear. "The signal," he said quietly. "Code Shepard has been activated." For a moment, Yuna didn't understand what he meant. Code Shepard was an ancient emergency protocol, something from the early days of human expansion that existed more as historical curiosity than practical procedure. She had learned about it in school, of course, but like most humans, she had never expected to hear those words spoken in real life. Then the meaning hit her like a physical blow. Code Shepard meant that human children were in mortal danger, that someone had broken the first law she had fought so hard to establish, the law that was supposed to protect both human children and the galaxy itself. "Where?" she whispered. "Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo replied, his voice still carrying that strange, flat quality. "Saurian forces have taken hostages. Multiple children confirmed." Around them, the laboratory had gone silent. Every human crew member had stopped their work and was staring at their communication devices with the same blank expression. It was like watching a hive mind activate, Except that humans didn't have a hive mind. They had something else, something that the other galactic species had never quite understood. Captain Wu Jin Seo's voice came over the ship's communication system, and even through the speakers, Yuna could hear the change in his tone. All hands, this is the captain. We have received a code Shepard alert. All non-essential personnel report to emergency stations. We are changing course for the Kepler sector, maximum speed. Captain, Yuna said, activating her communicator, this is Dr. Park. The Discovery is a research vessel, not a warship. What can we possibly do against Saurian military forces? There was a pause before the captain replied, and when he did, his voice carried a weight that made Yuna shiver. Dr. Park, you might want to check the tactical displays. We're not going alone. Yuna rushed to the nearest observation deck, Hyun Woo close behind her. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the familiar star patterns of the galactic core region, but something was different. Ships were moving out there, dozens of them, all heading in the same direction with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. Computer, she said, display all human vessels within 50 light-years of our current position. The ship's artificial intelligence complied, projecting a three-dimensional map into the air before them. What Yuna saw made her gasp in shock. Hundreds of ships were converging on the Kepler sector, their courses drawn as glowing lines across the star map. Merchant vessels, research ships, passenger liners, mining barges, even small personal craft, all moving with the same determined purpose. How is this possible? She whispered. There's no central command structure that could coordinate this kind of response. Hyun Woo was studying his portable scanner, his face growing more puzzled by the moment. It's not coming from any official source, he said. The signal is propagating through civilian communication networks, personal devices, even entertainment systems. It's like every human in the galaxy just decided to do the same thing at the same time. On the far side of the galactic spiral, similar scenes were playing out on every human world and ship. Factory workers were leaving their shifts early and heading home to pack emergency supplies. Retired military personnel were checking old equipment that hadn't been used in decades. Civilian cargo haulers were reviewing the hidden compartments and defensive systems that officially didn't exist. Commander Taewon Lee was aboard the military cruiser Defender when the signal reached them. He had been conducting routine patrol, exercises near the border with Hive Space, his crew running through standard tactical scenarios with the kind of professional boredom that marked peacetime service. The code Shepard alert changed everything in an instant. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving reports from Fleet Command. All available vessels are being recalled for immediate deployment to the Kepler sector. Taewon nodded, but his attention was focused on something else entirely. The tactical display was showing ship movements throughout human space, and what he saw there defied everything he thought he knew about his own species. Military vessels were moving. Yes, but so were civilian ships in numbers that shouldn't have been possible. Lieutenant, he called to his intelligence officer, how many total vessels are we looking at? The young officer worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with wide eyes. Sir, I'm reading over 3,000 confirmed vessels, already in transit, with more launching every hour. Current projections suggest we could have 10,000 ships in the Kepler sector within the next 72 hours. 10,000? Taewon repeated. That's impossible. Human space doesn't have that many military vessels. No, sir, the lieutenant agreed. Most of these are showing as civilian craft. But, sir, I'm detecting energy signatures that suggest they're not as defenseless as their registration data indicates. This was the part that would have surprised the alien species most if they had been able to observe it. Humans had always appeared to be a peaceful species, focused on exploration and trade rather than warfare. Their military was small compared to the great galactic powers, their weapons limited to defensive systems and patrol craft. What the aliens didn't know was that every human civilian vessel carried hidden capabilities. Cargo ships had concealed weapon hardpoints. Passenger liners had armor plating disguised as hull reinforcement. Research vessels carried military-grade sensors and communication arrays. Mining ships were equipped with tools that could serve as weapons in the right hands. It wasn't paranoia that had driven these modifications, it was instinct. Deep in their genetic memory, humans remembered being prey animals on a hostile world. They remembered the importance of being ready for threats that might come without warning. Most importantly, They remembered that survival sometimes meant being more dangerous than the things that hunted you. The Galactic Council received the first reports of mass human movement within 6 hours of the Code Shepard activation. The ancient chamber that had seen Unipark's speech 3 years earlier was now filled with confused and increasingly concerned alien delegates. "The humans are mobilizing," reported Admiral Thalion of the Depths Empire, his massive form rippling, with agitation in his water tank. "Our sensors are detecting thousands of their vessels converging on the Kepler sector. This appears to be a coordinated military response." Vextar of the Saurian Confederation coiled in his heated chair, his yellow eyes reflecting confusion and the first hints of concern. "This is impossible. Human space lacks the military infrastructure for such a deployment. Their fleet registry shows fewer than 500 military vessels total." The insectoid representative of the hive chittered nervously, its compound eyes reflecting the swirling displays of ship movements. "Our analysis suggests these are primarily civilian vessels, but their energy signatures are inconsistent with standard civilian configurations." In the center of the chamber, the ancient ethereal Norak flickered with patterns of deep red and orange, colors that his species used to express ancient memory and terrible knowledge. When he spoke, his static voice carried a weight that made every other delegate fall silent. "You still do not understand," he whispered. "You see ships and think of military force. You see humans and think of individual creatures pursuing individual goals. But you are watching something that your species have never developed because you never needed it." "What are we watching?" demanded Vextar, his earlier confidence beginning to crack. Norak pulsed with colors that had no translation in any other species' language. "You are watching a pack hunt," he said finally. "One of their children has been threatened, and now every human in the galaxy has become part of the same organism. They are no longer thinking as individuals. They are thinking as a species, the A." Chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. The great galactic civilizations had always assumed that humanity's strength lay in their technology or their adaptability. But what they were seeing now suggested something far more frightening. Humanity's true strength lay in their ability to instantly transform from a collection of individuals into a single coordinated force focused on a single goal. And that goal was the protection of their young no matter what the cost. The first human ships began arriving in the Kepler system exactly 72 hours after the Code Shepard signal was transmitted. Commander Drac watched from the bridge of his vessel Fang as points of light appeared at the edge of sensor range. Dozens at first, then hundreds, until the space around Kepler 442b began to look like a gathering storm. What disturbed him most was not their numbers, though those were impressive enough. It was the way they moved. Human ships had always seemed chaotic to Saurian observers, each one following its own course with little apparent coordination. But these vessels moved like a single organism, their formations flowing and shifting, with a precision that suggested perfect communication between every unit. "Status report," Drac ordered, his voice still confident but carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. His tactical officer, a young Saurian named Keth, worked frantically at his console. "Sir, I'm reading 437 human vessels in the system, with more arriving every few minutes. Most are showing as civilian craft, but their energy signatures are unusual." "Unusual how?" "They're running much hotter than standard civilian ships, sir. Their power cores are outputting at military levels, and I'm detecting what appear to be weapon signatures masked by civilian transponder codes," Drac hissed in frustration. This was not how the operation was supposed to unfold. Intelligence reports had indicated minimal human presence in this sector, perhaps a patrol ship or two that could be easily dealt with. Instead, he was facing what appeared to be a significant fleet deployment. "Open a channel to the lead human vessel," he ordered. The screen flickered to show the bridge of a ship that Drac didn't recognize. The human captain was a woman with gray hair and calm eyes, but there was something in her expression that made the Saurian commander uneasy. She wore the uniform of a merchant captain, but she carried herself like a warrior. "I am Captain Sunhee Park of the freighter New Horizon," she said, her voice perfectly level. "You are Commander Drac of the Saurian vessel Fang. We have come for our people." "Your people are criminals," Drac replied, falling back on his original justification. They were conducting illegal weapons research in violation of Council treaties. We are acting within our authority as Council enforcers. Captain Park's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes that made Drack's scales crawl. Commander Drack, you have taken human children hostage. This action violates the first law of the galaxy. You have one opportunity to release them peacefully. And if I refuse, then we will take them back by force. Drack laughed, the sound echoing through his bridge like breaking glass. You threaten me with a merchant fleet? I have 3 warships with full military armament. Your cargo haulers and passenger ships cannot stand against proper military vessels. On the screen, Captain Park turned to someone off camera and nodded once. Suddenly, the space around the Kepler system erupted in light as hundreds of civilian vessels simultaneously dropped their disguises. Cargo pods fell away to reveal weapon batteries. Passenger compartments retracted to expose missile launchers. Mining ships deployed drill arrays that could punch through military-grade armor. Commander Drack, Captain Park said quietly, I don't think you understand what you're looking at. These aren't merchant ships. These are human ships, and you have threatened our children. For the first time since the operation began, Drack felt genuine fear. The fleet surrounding his 3 vessels wasn't just numerically superior, it was moving, with a coordination that suggested years of joint training. But that was impossible, because these were civilian vessels that had never worked together before. What he couldn't know was that every human ship captain in the fleet was following the same basic tactical protocol, one that had been drilled into them since childhood through games and simulations that they had thought were just entertainment. Every human child learned to play Pack Hunt, a strategic game that taught basic fleet coordination and tactical thinking. What they were really learning was how to become part of a larger organism when their species was threatened. Sir, his tactical officer reported, his voice tight with panic. The human fleet is moving into attack formation. They're surrounding us on all vectors. Impossible, Drax snarled. Civilian ships don't have the communication systems necessary for this kind of coordination. But even as he spoke, he could see that they did. Every human vessel in the fleet was connected to every other vessel through a network that used everything, from official military channels to civilian entertainment systems. They were sharing targeting data, tactical assessments, and strategic information in real time, creating a collective intelligence that no single ship could match. The boarding action began without warning. One moment, the human fleet was holding position around the Saurian vessels. The next, specialized ships were launching from concealed bays throughout the formation. These weren't standard military shuttles, but rather mining pods, maintenance craft, and cargo haulers that had been modified for a very specific purpose. Captain Minho Kim led the assault on the Fang personally, his exploration vessel Harmony serving as the command ship for the rescue operation. As his boarding pod cut through the Saurian ship's hull with mining lasers, he thought about his son Do-hyun and about all the other human children scattered throughout the galaxy. Children who needed to know that they were safe, that their parents and their species would move heaven and earth to protect them. The fighting inside the Saurian vessel was brief and brutal. Human boarding teams moved through the corridors with the efficiency of pack hunters, their coordination so perfect that they seemed to anticipate each other's actions before they were taken. They used non-lethal weapons where possible, but when Saurian soldiers threatened the hostages, the humans' response was swift and final. Drack made his last stand on the bridge of his own ship, surrounded by the bodies of his crew and facing a human rescue team that had carved through his vessels. Defenses like they were made of paper. The human leader, a man with captain's insignia and cold, determined eyes, stepped over the wreckage and fixed him with a stare that made his blood freeze. You hurt our children, Captain Kim said simply. This is against all conventions of civilized warfare, Drack protested. I demand to be treated as a prisoner of war under council regulations. Kim's expression didn't change. You forfeited any claim to civilized treatment when you struck that little girl. But don't worry, Commander. We're not going to execute you. We're going to do something much worse. What? We're going to let you live to explain to your superiors how 3 Saurian warships were defeated by a fleet of human civilian vessels, how your entire military operation was destroyed by merchant captains and cargo haulers, how the Great Saurian Confederation was humiliated by the species you called weak and emotional. The rescue of the hostages took less than an hour. Human medical teams swarmed through the Saurian holding areas, checking each freed prisoner for injuries and providing immediate treatment. The children were handled with special care, surrounded by adults who spoke to them in gentle voices and promised them that they were safe now. 12-year-old Jiwon Choi, the girl who had been struck by the Saurian guard, looked up at one of her rescuers with wide eyes. "Are you soldiers?" she asked. The woman knelt down to her level, and Jiwon could see that she wore the uniform of a cargo ship engineer. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "We're just humans, and you're our children. That means we'll always come for you no matter what." As the human fleet prepared to leave the Kepler system, they left behind something that would change the galaxy forever. 3 disabled Saurian warships drifted in orbit around the planet, their crews alive, but their vessels completely gutted. The message was clear, visible to every species in the galaxy through the sensor networks that monitored all major star systems. Humanity was not the weak, emotional species that the other civilizations had believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, something that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. They were a species that would mobilize thousands of ships and tens of thousands of crew members in response to a threat against their children. They were a species that could coordinate a military operation using civilian vessels and entertainment networks. Most importantly, they were a species that could transform from peaceful explorers into efficient killers the moment their young were threatened. The last message transmitted from the Kepler system was a simple one, broadcast on all frequencies in every major galactic language. "The children are safe. The first law has been enforced. This matter is now closed." But across the galaxy, in the council chambers and military headquarters of a dozen different species, everyone knew that the matter was far from closed. They had seen what humans were capable of when pushed too far, and they would never look at humanity the same way again. The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly the same as it had 3 years earlier when Dr. Yuna Park had first proposed the first law, but everything else had changed completely. The same alien delegates sat in their floating chairs and breathing chambers. The same translation devices hummed with activity, and the same starlight patterns danced across the crystalline walls. But the atmosphere in the Great Chamber was entirely different now, charged with a tension that made every species' representative sit a little straighter and speak a little more carefully. Yuna stood at the same speaking platform where she had once been treated with condescending amusement, but the faces looking down at her now showed no trace of humor. The Saurian delegation was notably smaller than before, their leader, Vexitar, having been replaced by a much younger representative who seemed to shrink into his heated chair whenever human delegates looked in his direction. The Hive representatives clicked and chittered nervously among themselves, their compound eyes never quite focusing on any single point. Even the massive forms of the Depth's Empire seemed subdued, floating quietly in their water-filled chambers. Only the ancient ethereals appeared unchanged, their energy forms flickering with the same mysterious patterns they had always displayed. But Yuna had learned to read those patterns over the past month, and she could see something in Norak's glow that might have been satisfaction, or perhaps vindication. "Honored delegates," Yuna began, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "I have been asked to address this council regarding the recent events in the Kepler sector and their implications for galactic law and order." The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the translation devices seemed almost loud. No one interrupted her. No one made dismissive comments about mammalian sentiment or emotional weakness. They all understood now that they were dealing with something far more complex and dangerous than they had ever imagined. "1 month ago," Yuna continued, "forces of the Saurian Confederation attacked a human research station and took 60 civilian hostages, including 8 children between the ages of 6 and 14. This action was a clear violation of the first law of this council, the protection of human children, that this body unanimously approved." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. The response to this violation was swift and decisive. Within 72 hours, over 4,000 human vessels had converged on the Kepler system. The Saurian forces were defeated, the hostages were rescued, and the first law was enforced. Admiral Thalion of the Depth's Empire surfaced in his tank, sending ripples across the water. When he spoke, his voice lacked its usual commanding boom. "Dr. Park, the Council seeks to understand how such a massive military deployment was possible. Our intelligence services indicate that humanity lacks the command structure necessary for such coordination. Yuna smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Thalion, you're absolutely correct. We don't have a central command structure that could coordinate 4,000 ships. What we have is something much more effective. Which is? Asked the new Saurian representative, his voice barely above a whisper. Instinct, Yuna replied simply. What you witnessed in the Kepler system was not a military operation planned by generals and admirals. It was the spontaneous response of an entire species to a threat against our children. Every human ship captain who participated in that operation made their own decision to join the fleet, following protocols that are encoded in our DNA rather than our regulations. The Hive representatives' mandibles clacked together in confusion. This is impossible. Individual action cannot produce such coordination. There must be a controlling intelligence directing such behavior. There is, Yuna agreed. It's called evolution. Humans evolved as persistence predators on a hostile world where the survival of the group depended on the protection of the young. Those instincts didn't disappear when we reached the stars. They just adapted to new circumstances. She activated the display system, and the chamber filled with images from the battle in the Kepler system. Ships moving in perfect formation, boarding actions carried out with surgical precision, medical teams treating rescued hostages with tender care. But what struck the alien observers most was the faces of the human participants. They showed no rage, no bloodlust, just the calm determination of apex predators who had found threats to their offspring. What you're seeing, Yuna explained, is humanity's true nature. We are not the peaceful, emotional species that you believed us to be. We are a species that has built our entire civilization around the protection of our children, and we will mobilize every resource at our disposal to eliminate threats to them. The ancient, ethereal Norak flickered brighter, his static voice carrying across the chamber with unusual clarity. Now you begin to understand why the first law was truly necessary. Dr. Park, would you like to tell them about the historical precedents? Yuna nodded, and the display changed to show star charts and ancient data files. Before humanity achieved spaceflight, we shared our galaxy with 3 other intelligent species. The builders were master engineers who constructed vast cities across dozens of worlds. The singers were energy beings somewhat similar to the ethereals, known for their beautiful communications across interstellar distances. The harvesters were insectoid creatures who specialized in ecological manipulation. She paused, watching as the delegates leaned forward with interest. This was history that most of them had never heard before. All 3 species made the same mistake that the Saurians made in the Kepler system. They underestimated human protective instincts and threatened our children. The builders tried to enslave human settlements for construction labor, including the children. The singers attempted to use human young in experiments on consciousness transfer. The harvesters saw human children as a food source. The chamber was completely silent now, every delegate hanging on her words. All 3 species are extinct, Yuna said simply. Humanity drove them to complete extinction before we ever left our home solar system. Not because we were more technologically advanced, but because we were more motivated. When you threaten our children, we don't stop until the threat is completely eliminated. The implications of her words hit the chamber like a physical blow. The great galactic civilizations had been congratulating themselves on their wisdom in allowing humanity to join the council, but what they had really done was invite apex predators into their midst. Predators who had proven that they could destroy entire species when sufficiently motivated. The first law, Yuna continued, was never intended to protect human children from the galaxy. It was intended to protect the galaxy from what happens when human children are threatened. It's a warning, written in the most formal language we could devise, explaining the consequences of crossing a line that you cannot see until it's too late. Vexitar's replacement finally found his voice, though it shook with barely controlled fear. Are you threatening us, Dr. Park? Yuna's expression remained calm and pleasant, but every human in the chamber smiled at the same time, and it was not a reassuring sight. I'm not threatening anyone, Representative. I'm simply explaining why the first law exists and why it's in everyone's best interests to follow it. She gestured to the display, which now showed images of human children playing in parks and schools across the galaxy, laughing, learning, growing up in safety under the protection of the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. Our children are the center of our civilization, she said softly. They are why we explore the stars, why we build new worlds, why we seek peace with our neighbors. They are our most precious treasure and our greatest strength. As long as they are safe, humanity will remain peaceful partners in this galactic community. The unspoken corollary hung in the air like a sword over the assembly. As long as the children were safe, humanity would remain peaceful. But if anyone threatened them again, if anyone broke the first law, then the galaxy would learn why. Entire species had vanished from history before humans ever left their home system. The vote to reaffirm and strengthen the first law was unanimous, just as it had been 3 years earlier. But this time, no one voted out of condescension or amusement. They voted out of a clear understanding of what the consequences would be if they didn't. As the session ended and the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Una found herself standing next to the ancient ethereal Norak. His energy form pulsed with colors that she had learned to recognize as approval and perhaps a touch of relief. "You handled that well," his static voice whispered. "Though I suspect some of them still don't fully understand what they're dealing with." "They understand enough," Una replied. "The important thing is that our children are safe now. The galaxy knows what will happen if anyone threatens them again." Norak flickered, with what might have been amusement. "Your species fascinates me, Dr. Park. You appear so peaceful, so focused on cooperation and mutual understanding. But underneath that pleasant exterior lurks something that could destroy civilizations." "Only if we have to," Una said quietly. "We prefer peace, but we're very good at war when it's necessary." As she walked out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond,